My name is Steve Darman. I'm the chair of the Mohawk Valley Housing and Homeless Assistance Coalition. We started seeing homeless vets show up in our local emergency shelters, our addiction crisis center in 2006, 2007. It came to my attention, and I and a bunch of other heroic people in this community, as Jessica pointed out, are stepping up. We still have a lot of work to do, but we're stepping up to help our veterans come home, because it takes a community to bring a veteran home. It's not a VA thing, it's not a Department of Defense thing, it takes a community. That's families, that's friends, that's co-workers, that's all of us together. So I also am grateful and thankful that you're here today as the community to support veterans and family members who deployed, are coming home, and still working on reintegration issues. And that includes our Vietnam and Korean and World War II vets, if we have any here. We had a World War II Iwo Jima survivor here last year, still walking around on two legs, amazing guy. But I want to introduce Patrick Welch. He's our keynote speaker. I'm the speakers person on the Vet Expo committee, and I've had the honor and privilege of meeting Patrick maybe 4 or 5 years ago. We worked together on a couple projects here in upstate New York, because it's not just about Utica or Oneida County or Herkimer County or Madison. It's about our whole region welcoming veterans home and facilitating that reentry and reintegration thing. And one of the projects that I worked with Patrick on was a blueprint for community-based veteran outreach centers. We have one right here in Utica, one of the first in the nation. The very first one is in Rochester, New York, founded in 1973, that's become a national model for this country. Again, it takes a community to support the veterans' reentry and reintegration. So Patrick quickly came to my attention as a regional and national leader in this effort. He's went to Vietnam in 1965 with the 3rd Marine Division, came home with a really bad leg, a Purple Heart, and a cane. So he said he needs a roving mic. He's got to move around while he's talking. We got that set up for him, and I'm taking advantage of it. But I'm impressed with our elder warriors, like Patrick Welch, because they never give up the fight. They know that being a warrior is not just a wartime thing, that it's serving your community in a dedicated, selfless way, and veterans and civilian members. And Patrick's done that in a variety of different ways. As the Veteran Service Director for Erie County, as one of the key people working with Judge Russell out there to start the first in our nation's Veterans Court in Buffalo, New York, that now has over 170 courts nationwide. Quickly replicated. It was featured on 60 Minutes not too long ago. There's a small one in Rochester. Really good example of what you can do on the community side to help our veterans come home and reintegrate, including supporting them through difficult, challenging times. Patrick's a role model for me. I'm really impressed with him as a person, his skills, and his advocacy. And I think in 20 minutes, you'll have a much better sense of what I mean. So without any further conversation, I want to give the mic to Patrick Welch, retired U.S. Marine Corps.
Good afternoon. Hello. I know a lot of you have been out on the grinder at 0530, and your response to your DIs is a lot better than that. I need to know you got some blood flowing through your veins, and you got a set of vocal cords. So let's try it again, folks. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Hoorah! All right. Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you so much, Jessica. And for SUNYIT. I didn't even know SUNYIT existed. So Steve got a hold of me and said, we're having this function, and told me where it was. My kids all went to SUNY schools, but he didn't know this one existed. And I'm very impressed with what they're doing down here and the nanotechnology that's going to come forward. Would all of my fellow veterans please stand up? I am always humble. I am always humbled in the presence of greatness. And when I am in a room with my fellow veterans, greatness is all around me. It is because of all of you and 48 other million people who have served this country since 1775 that we have a United States of America. And I want to personally thank each and every one of you for serving our country. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm going to talk about two things. I'm going to talk a little bit about what our warriors go through, and I'm going to talk a little bit about community involvement. The first fact, no one goes to war and ever comes home the same person. No one. There's three major wounds of war. There are the mental wounds, which are what called the invisible wounds. Post-traumatic stress disorder, TBI, anxiety, depression, all of those types of things. Those are the ones we don't see. They used to be called in the Civil War soldier's heart. And if you're not aware of it, the VA was founded during the Civil War. And the first VA site was up in Togus, Maine. Way up in north, far north as you can get in this country. And all of the vets that had soldier's heart and were amputees and everything else and couldn't get back into society were all shipped away. Get them out of the community. We don't want these wackos hanging around. Because in those days, if you had mental health issues, you were a friggin' nut. They weren't nuts. They had a traumatic experience. They saw things. They did things. And then in World War I, it became shell shock because of trench warfare and constantly being hit. And those soldiers came home with shell shock. In World War II, it became combat fatigue, and into Korea, combat fatigue. And maybe some of you had an Uncle Joe that came home from the war and then went into a bedroom in your grandparents' house. And Uncle Joe never came out of his room except to have something to eat and go to the bathroom and take a shower. Uncle Joe lived in his room, and everybody said, Uncle Joe was in the war, so we don't bother with Uncle Joe. And then my generation went to Vietnam. The baby boomers. We shoot our mouths off a hell of a lot. We came back from Vietnam and said, wait a minute, folks. We have seen and we have done some things that are bothering us. You need to talk to us. But we didn't go to the VA. We helped create the vet centers. And the vet centers, staffed by combat veterans, where there are no VA records other than in that vet center, became our refuge. And then the DSM finally came along, and the clinical people now gave it a name. It was called post-traumatic stress disorder. But you know what? It's been around forever. Since the first cavemen started fighting with each other. They had PTSD, but now we had a clinical name to put to it. I have PTSD, and I'm not afraid to admit it. I used to be afraid to admit it, but it's kind of like AA and NA. Once you realize that you've got a problem, you need to talk to someone. For the first 12 years that I came back from Vietnam, my counselor was Dr. Johnny Walker Black. And every night, Dr. Black told me I was just fine. It was all those civilians out there that were screwed up. I chose alcohol because I saw what the VA was doing to my fellow vets, and it was doing nothing but pumping them full of drugs. I had some fellow vets that walked around with fanny packs, 35, 40 prescriptions that they were taking. They couldn't function in society. They couldn't hold a job. They couldn't keep a marriage. They didn't have relationships with their children. All because the VA's way of treating it was pump them full of drugs. I looked at alcohol and said, well, I can control my alcohol. I can still go to school. I can still go to work. But at night, Dr. Black counseled me. It took me 30 years to acknowledge, did I do something wrong?
No, but your mic is misbehaving.
All right, what I'm trying to get to is that my struggle is no different than everybody else's struggle. Mine's not unique. There are hundreds of thousands and millions of veterans who've served this country over the years. Not just my problem, it's all of our problems. We don't ever go to war and come home the same. The physical wounds of war, I bear those also. I tripped off a bouncing Betty mine that blew my body apart. I spent 2 years in hospitals while they put me back together. It's not unique. The current crew of veterans is going through, and the survival rate is a credit to military medicine today. 98% of those with traumatic injuries, legs blown off, arms blow off, if they get them to a field unit within 60 minutes, they survive. And that's a great thing. But now we're looking at serving a group of military people that we haven't seen as much before. Single amputees, double amputees, triple amputees. There's more of them now because military medicine has saved them. Well, now they've got new, unique challenges. All of a sudden, they're wearing 2 prostheses on their legs. That's a new challenge. We don't always seek help. A lot of people say, why don't veterans just go get help? What's their problem? Think about your training. Being a Marine, I was taught adapt, improvise, overcome, persevere, never give up. One of our recruiting slogans in the Marine Corps is pain is weakness leaving the body. Our military is not trained to seek help. Our military is trained in leadership and how to overcome and adapt and complete the mission. Now the mission becomes adapting back to civilian life with certain challenges. And there's a group like Soldier On that's out there helping building communities for veterans that have unique things. Habitat for Humanity has got a veterans program now where they're building veterans housing with unique characteristics. So the physical wounds come along, and those are lifetime, just like the mental wounds. And then there's the chemical wounds of war. World War I, it was mustard gas, sarin. Millions of people died in those gas attacks. Wasn't so prevalent in World War II in Korea. Then came Vietnam. Only it wasn't the enemy using chemicals. It was our own government using chemicals to help us have clear lines of fire, kill the vegetation. They distributed the most deadly toxins known to mankind. 47 years later, there are areas of Vietnam that nothing grows. Vietnam has one of the highest birth defect rates in the world because of Agent Orange. And Agent Orange is slowly eating away at our bodies. The chemicals of today's veteran, depleted uranium. Everybody know about depleted uranium? Yes or no? Yes. Okay, come on, wake up, folks. I know you had lunch, but you're not allowed to go to sleep on me. All right. Depleted uranium lines the inside of our Bradley vehicles, of our M1A1 Abrams tanks, to help as a protective device. We've got artillery shells that are coated with depleted uranium. That's radioactive, folks. It's a chemical. And our military is being exposed to those chemicals. The other one is burn pits. Anybody ever hear of burn pits?
Yeah.
No. All right, I have to go with the nose. All right. We have a tendency in our military when we leave a base not to take everything with us. So let's say this was our forward operating base and we're now told to abandon it. We're not going to take all these tables and chairs. We're going to bring in a backhoe. We're going to dig a big hole. And we're going to throw all this stuff in the hole and we're going to put some JP5 on it. You know what that is? Jet fuel. High octane stuff. And then somebody's going to toss a match on it. Now, I'm not a chemist and I'm not a scientist, but do you think in all of this stuff there may be some toxic chemicals that were used to build this stuff? And now the troops are standing around inhaling all of that stuff. So the wounds of war, the physical, the mental, and the chemical, don't change. All that changes is the warriors of new generations to come along. And the weapons that we use to kill and maim each other just get better and better. So that's what our people go through. Those are the things that they're engaged in. You need to know that our all-volunteer military is the best educated, the best trained in the world. We don't have anybody in this world that's got a better military than we do. A lot of people in statistics talk about our military and say, well, it's the undereducated lower class that enlists in the military. Bull. You can't get in today's military without a high school education or at least a GED. I was kicked out of high school at 16 years old. 17 years old, I took the oath and I went to Paris Island 3 days later. They wouldn't take me today. They tell me to go away and come back when I get educated. We have more NCOs and staff NCOs with master's degrees than we have ever had in the history of our military. We have more officers with masters and PhDs than we've ever had in our history. When they're not out training on their battle skills, they're studying, they're learning, they're growing. We have a professional army, professional military. I don't want to slight the other services. I might get a little partisan as I go through this, so forgive me. But Marines are that way, you know. We can't help ourselves sometimes. All right. Now, they go through this, multiple tours. We've got some people I know that have done 7 tours in the 12 years that we've been at war. If you're not aware of it, Monday of this week was the 12th anniversary of the day we invaded Afghanistan. Our military has done more with little and have done a phenomenal job with the mission that they were tasked to do. I only did a half a tour when I got wounded. I can't imagine making 5 or 6 trips back to a war zone. Secondary PTSD in our military families is a huge issue. Particularly in this war, where we've engaged the reserve and the guard. At the height of the Iraq War, when we had about 160,000 troops in Iraq, 42% were reserve and guard members, our citizen soldiers. Now in the active duty military, you've got your base, you've got Camp Pendleton, you've got Fort Bragg, you've got Fort Lewis, you got Jacksonville. I'm trying to make sure I touch every service. I don't know where the coasties are, they're all over the place. But that's your community. That's where your strength is. The reserve and the guard is different. A reserve and guard unit you can be a member of, and you live 300 miles away. And you travel on drill weekends to meet with those units. But guess what? Your family's got no contact. And family has become a big issue. Not a bad issue, but it's become a big issue because with the professional army now, 50% of our active duty military is married. In the Guard and Reserve, it's about 72% married. So we've got a dynamic that we haven't seen before with citizen soldiers and with multiple deployments. Secondary PTSD in military children is through the roof. Up where I come from in the Buffalo area, Western New York, we've got about 6,700 reserve and guard members. We are having severe problems in the elementary and high schools with military children. Because think about it, folks. Mom or dad leaves this morning to go to war, and you don't know if you're ever going to see them again. And now you go to school, and you're the only kid in that school that's a military family. And you stop communicating with some of your friends because all you're doing is thinking about mom or dad. Your friends say, hey, we're going to the movies Friday night. You want to join us? And the kid says, no, I got a Skype call with dad or mom tonight. And your friends start to say, well, you know what? Every time we ask you to go someplace, you can't ever make it. So their friends stop asking. Pretty soon, Johnny or Janie starts to academically fail. They may start acting out. And what do schools do? They give them detention. We have been educating our people as part of our community involvement and going out and talking to school districts, to their social workers in their schools, and talking about military children. Now, a lot of times reserve and guard families will not self-identify for security reasons and other reasons, but we're trying to get them to do that so that when Janie or John starts acting out, somebody says, do you have anybody in the military? And when Jane or John says, yeah, mom just left for her third deployment, they don't give them detention. That's not going to solve anything. It's just going to exacerbate the situation. So we now have community involvement where that school worker gets in contact with one of our resources and we get Johnny and Janie some help. That's part of the community involvement. The program of advocacy that I follow, that I started, I've been involved in veterans advocacy for 47 years. I'm proud, that's probably longer than some of you are old. But my introduction and the reason I got involved in veterans advocacy is very simple. I spent a year in the Naval Hospital. They treated me pretty well. And they transferred me up to the Buffalo Veterans Hospital. 1966. My introduction to VA healthcare was the following. They were doing some tests on me and sticking needles in me and all my crevices and everything else. And I said to the one clinician one time, I said, you know, that hurts. Can't you guys do this a little better? And the clinician looked at me and said, Welch, you better understand something at this VA. It's mind over matter. We don't mind, and you don't matter. That was my introduction to VA healthcare. I'm laying in a cast, full body cast, and somebody I have to depend on for my care is telling me I don't matter. It's not that way anymore. In 21st century, it's the good VA. I get all of my care at the VA. I encourage veterans to go there. It is the good VA, believe me, folks. If anybody here has gone to the VA before and had a bad experience and have not gone back, please give them another chance. Please, I beg of you, give them another chance. All of you veterans, are you all registered with Veterans Healthcare and you got your red, white, and blue ID card?
Yes.
Who doesn't? Get your ass over there.
I get better care from Medicaid than I did when I was at the VA.
All right. But I want to tell you, there's two reasons that it's important that I always encourage every veteran who's not registered. Number one, you may need the VA at some point in your future. You may. Number two, think about your fellow vets. The funding for VA healthcare is based upon registered veterans. And the way the VA funds, if you've got 1,000 veterans registered, they base the funding on that. As their registration falls through deaths or whatever, their funding starts to drop. Now, if you need to go to the VA, they may not have the services available because of funding. So please, if you don't want to go there, at least register so you're counted in the numbers and it'll help your other veterans. There we go. He's recruiting, all right? And if you don't want to go to the big concrete building, go to the vet center. How you doing, Mr. Fonda?
Okay.
Good. I met Mr. Fonda earlier. He's an Army medic who served in Vietnam.
Correct.
Thank you, Mr. Fonda.
Thank you.
All right. All right, now let me talk. How's my time?
Another 5-10 minutes? We good?
5 minutes?
No, 10 minutes.
Okay.
Everybody good? Another 10 minutes?
Everybody good?
Give them an hour, give them an hour.
All right. Nobody's throwing tomatoes at me yet, so I guess I'm all right. Okay, let's talk about advocacy and why we need community engagement. My form of advocacy is called the 4 pillars of empowerment. Got 4 pillars, so visualize it. They told me I couldn't bring a PowerPoint, so I can't show it to you. But just kind of visualize the old Roman structures. But I got all these pillars. Up at the top, there's this big triangle thing. That's the veterans and their families up at the top. And I want to take this opportunity to thank all of you family members, because you serve also. And a lot of times the families don't get the recognition that they deserve, because they're keeping everything together at home. Some of my vets have told me that being out in the desert is easier than being at home, because they know what their job is. They got a single job mission. The spouse at home has got to do everything. So to all of you military families out there, thank you for serving. All right, the first pillar involves the government, if it's working. Right now, we've got one sign on the table that said, due to the furlough, I couldn't come. But when the government is working, we need to make sure when our veterans come back to our community that we're encouraging them and working with them through government services. The first one is the VA, to get them registered with the VA. All veterans from OIF, OEF, and OND are eligible for 5 free years of health care at the VA. Many of them do not know that. So if they're not working, whatever they're doing, they're thinking, what am I doing for health insurance? They don't have to worry about it. They need to get to their VA. And they've got 5 free years of health care. We need to talk to them about any potential claims they may have. The clinical statistics say that about 20 to 30% of everybody who's gone through Iraq and Afghanistan will have PTSD, anxiety, depression, TBI. We need to talk to them. We've got veteran service officers that are there to help veterans talk about what injuries they may have had. Mental, physical, and chemical. They were exposed to all of those things. We need to talk to them about that. It's a difficult thing. It's a difficult thing to sit down and say to someone, I got a problem. There's a lot of things I think about. There's a lot of things I wake up in the middle of the night soaking wet. It's hard to talk to someone about that. But we need to encourage that. We need to find out if they're a homeowner. Did you apply for your real estate tax exemptions on your home? A lot of veterans don't know that. I've signed up World War II vets that didn't know they had a tax exemption. Make sure, if you own a home now, make sure you're getting that tax exemption. What state benefits may be available to you? What county benefits may be available to you? Oneida, you Oneida County? Oneida County Clerk's office is here. They issue a veteran's ID card. We do it in Erie County too. That gets you veterans discounts at Lowe's and Home Depot. You're just opening up a new Bass store, right? I saw in the news last night. I guess that's the big thing this week, right? Bass Pro Shop is here.
Yeah.
Who's been there yet? Nobody yet?
They open today.
Oh, they open today. Well, you can't leave until I'm done. Okay? All right.
Okay.
Okay, so we need to get the government involved. There are a lot of things that veterans have earned through their service to this country. And I always emphasize and try to make everybody understand, veterans' benefits are earned. They are not an entitlement. This veteran, and this taxpayer's definition of an entitlement, is money that they take out of my pocket and your pocket, and they put it in a bank in Washington, and then disperse it to people who have never contributed to the economy or the defense of this country. That's how I define an entitlement. Every veteran has earned everything that they're getting, and it's not enough. So the first pillar is government. We need to make sure that you're getting the things you have earned. The second pillar in the community is education, SUNYIT. When I went to work for Erie County in 2008, before the post 9/11 GI Bill came out, I started a program. We've got 21 colleges and universities in my particular area. I felt that the benefits that they were getting for education from the Montgomery GI Bill just didn't cut it. So in concert with some of my colleagues, we developed a program, and we wanted colleges to be veteran friendly. And I'll get to my definition of that in a minute. So I looked at the 21 colleges and universities, and we've got a 2-year school called Trocare College, mostly in the health sciences that they operated. The president of the college at the time was a Vietnam veteran. So I targeted him. You know how we target? We set up a mission. I said, I'm coming to see you. All right? So I went to see Dr. Hurley. He was an Army medic in Vietnam. And I said, Paul, Trocare needs to become veteran friendly. And he said, well, I think we are. And I said, no, you're not. I said, here's the definition of veteran friendly. Your tuition at your school is $10,000 a year. With the Montgomery GI Bill and some state benefits, a veteran may be able to get about $5,000 of aid. So there's about a $5,000 shortfall. For me to give you a certificate that says you're a veteran-friendly college, you need to pay the other $5,000. And he looked at me and said, that's pretty damn friendly. I said, yes it is. And if you've ever been in sales, you know you make your pitch, you make the close, and then you shut up. And I looked at him, and he looked at me, and I looked at him, and he looked at me. This might have only gone on for 15 or 20 seconds, but with that dead silence, it seems like it's a lot longer. And finally he said, okay. I then went on to 5 other schools. Before Congress passed the post 9/11 GI Bill, in our community, we had 6 colleges and universities that were already providing a tuition-free education for veterans. We now have at our 21 schools, every one of those schools has a veteran service office staffed by a veteran as a full-time position. Their job is to go out and bring veterans into the 21 schools in our particular area, and they can talk to vets because they speak our language. When we ask them what their MOS was, or they tell us they were, what's the Army, 11 Bravo? 11 Bravo, 0311 in the Marine Corps. We speak their language, we know there, we've been there. The enrollment for veterans in colleges is growing substantially. We need to get them in. We need to do the same thing as a community that we did after World War II. After World War II, 8 million of the 16 million who served during that time came home and took advantage of the GI Bill at that time and went on to become doctors and lawyers and all kinds of things and built the greatest economic and military power this world has ever seen. We need to do the same thing with the newest, greatest generation who have been fighting a war for 12 years. Am I okay?
Right.
I got 2 more pillars. Okay. The third pillar is the professions in the business community. There's a sign over here that says 10 reasons to hire veterans. We need to get the business community engaged, not in verbiage. In Vietnam, we had a slogan, you talk the talk, but do you walk the walk? You can hang all the yellow ribbon magnets you want, and all these, we support our troop banners and everything else. But if you don't do something, you're a big hypocrite. You need to get engaged. So what did we do? We went to the business community and said, what are you doing for hiring veterans? Oh yeah, we hire veterans. I said, really? I said, I went on your online application, which is what most of them do nowadays. Nobody does paper applications. Basically, it's got to be online. I said, I went to your website for your application. Number one, I didn't see any question that said, did you serve in the military, including the Guard and Reserve? Why isn't that question on there? Well, I don't know. I said, so how do you identify who a veteran is? If you're telling me you're giving veteran preferences and you're hiring, don't you have to know who a veteran is? Well, yeah. Well, now in our area, government agencies and businesses and colleges all ask a question. Did you serve in the military, including the Guard and Reserve? And by checking off that box, it gets through a lot of the filters. A lot of companies you go and wonder why nobody ever gets a reply to an online application. They've got filters, a lot of these companies, and they're looking for certain keywords. And if you don't get those keywords into that online application, you're filtered out. What we've got a good portion of doing, and we're not ever going to get all of them, is when they tick off that box, that immediately gets them through the filters and gets them to the Human Resources Department, so that at least the veteran gets a chance to go in. So that's the professions. With Erie County Bar Association, you've got an Oneida and Herkimer and all these other bar associations. We got them to form a veterans committee. Many of the lawyers on that committee are veterans. They will provide pro bono legal services to a veteran or a veteran's family that can't pay for it. We've got the Mental Health Association involved. There's a program called Give an Hour. Anybody ever heard of it?
No.
National program. What it is, it's an association of psychologists and psychiatrists that volunteer 1 hour a week to counsel veterans or their families. We've got the same thing with the lawyers group. So we've got the professions engaged. We've got the unions engaged with the Helmets to Hard Hats program. You heard of that? That's a program. Not everybody is meant to go to college. Just not meant to. They want to work in the trades, do other things. So this is a program to get them engaged in that. The fourth pillar is the not-for-profit agency. And you've got several not-for-profits here at the table today. In our particular community, our not-for-profits contribute about $4 billion a year into our economy. The reason we looked at the not-for-profit community, particularly those that provide health care and mental health care, many of your Guard and Reserve members want to make it a career. If they've got a deployment or multiple deployments and they may have some mental health issues, they're not going to go to the DOD and they're not going to go to the VA because those records can be public and the commanding officer of the base can access those records. So we've got not-for-profit mental health agencies in our community that will provide their families. Because if you're not aware of it, there is a stigma about mental health in this country. PTSD does not mean you're crazy. It means you've experienced a traumatic event. What we need to do is make sure that those people get the help. In the military, you've got 2 chances for promotion. In the civilian world, you can get into a job and stay in a job forever. Not so in the military. Promotion board comes up. If they see you're seeking mental health care, they're not ever going to admit it, but more than likely you're not going to get that promotion. And the next cycle comes up 2 or 3 years later. If you're still in the mental health community, you're not going to get that promotion and you're going to be asked to resign because you only get 2 shots. You could have 17 or 18 years in the Guard and Reserve and multiple deployments and be asked to resign at 18 years and you get no benefits. We need to have the not-for-profits involved in helping as the community environment to service our veterans and their families. So that's the 4 pillars. They're going to grab the hook and pull me off. All right. One last thing to leave you with. And you've heard this statement before, but I expand it a little bit. Freedom is not free because it has been bought and paid for with the sweat, the tears, the blood, the lives of 1.3 million Americans in cemeteries all over this world, and the 93,300 that are still listed as POWs and MIAs. That's the price of freedom, folks. And it's a hell of a lot more expensive than bullets and bombs. Thank you all very, very much.